Okay. Hello, everybody. So, I am going to tell you about a time in my life where I was so paralyzed trying to figure out how to get back to my old life. And then one day, to be able to move forward in my life, I really had to realize that that version of me no longer existed. And that's when real transformation happened. And that's when, momentum and movement was able to happen into my life again. So I was about 17 years old at the time. And, most people, we go through things as children. Some things are more traumatic than others, CSAM. I don't know the right acronym for it, but yeah, child abuse. At a younger age, I was 12, and for some reason, at 17 years old, that story of what happened to me became more publicized to the point where, CPS got involved, the police got involved, charges were brought up, and I just remember during that time, I was removed from my home, the home that I had always known, 17 years old, going into senior year, and I was living in between like a friend's house and a court approved place for me to stay, and a what are those things called? Protective home, or like a group home for kids, that didn't foster kids who didn't have nowhere to go. So, or like even most of the kids were getting out of juvie, or some were there just for protective reasons. Others were there because there was no room in foster homes, or there wasn't enough space. So they had these group homes throughout, the state. So I went to one, and it was like literally 2 counties, or like 1 or 2 counties away from where I had lived. But it was my senior year, and so somehow the state approved for me to be transported, back and forth to my regular high school. I was an athlete at the time, so I don't know, they got around it some kind of way. But I remember when the truth came out, I felt shame, I felt remorse, I felt regret, because I was a senior, and the things that had happened to me were, 5 years. It happened to me when I was 12. So I remember just feeling like, dang, like, what have I done? If I had to just stay quiet and stayed in my place a little while longer, none of this would be happening to me. I would be still living at home, having my room, being home with my sister, having a, somewhat regular life, the life that was normal and comfortable to me at the time, and I just remember days, nights, car rides back and forth from school to the group home, walking from school to, whatever court-approved place that I was staying at the time. I just remember trying to figure out in my brain, like, how could I go back to that summer night and how could I just go back and like never have opened my mouth, never have a weak moment where I shared my vulnerability and my feelings, with somebody who was then going to escalate the situation and, from their point of view and their perspective, get me help. And I will say, in the moment, back in the day, I was very disappointed. I was very, hurt that the outcome was the police showed up and, that the state was coming in and they were gonna try to protect me and, do something, because I was just simply talking about something that happened years ago when I was 12. But it had weighed on me so heavily that I did become, so hopeless that I wanted to give up on my life. I did start having behaviors where I was now harming myself, and back then, even in the moment, I didn't realize how much help I actually needed. I didn't realize that, that situation, even just me speaking out to that right person, was going to really change my life and really catapult me into, at the time, I called it a worse situation. But now, hindsight looking back, that really saved my life. Me telling my truth and someone stepping in to get me out of the situation that I was in, to try to get me real help, it really did save my life, because it was bad. I was going to take my life, So yeah, I just remember one day, I turned 18 December, and, they told me, oh, you can't stay here anymore at the group home. I turned 18 in a group home for minors, So they told me, you're too old, you can't stay here, but, you're not able to, you're still in high school, you haven't graduated, you don't have a job, so you're really not able to take care of yourself. So they took me down to the court, and I remember going down to the court and having to sign myself into what they call extended foster care. Basically, foster care for people, for, young adults that are 18 to 21 who still need support, still of a foster care family, who don't really have family or support resources that can come in and help them or take them on. So I remember signing myself into that program, extended foster care, and I don't remember really what day, but I know I was 18 and I was so fed up with the process and being in extended foster care. I wasn't really getting the help that I needed, partially because I didn't know how to lean in and lock in with the resources that were there. I didn't know how to self-advocate. I didn't know how to speak up for myself and really say, this is what I need, this is what I don't understand. But also, nobody really was being proactive around me saying, what do you need? Or, this is the time, the period in your life that you're in. These are the steps you need to take. This is what you need. They just really threw hey, you're 18 now. You can go to college. You can do whatever you want. This is your life. Figure it out. There was nobody really holding my hand, walking me down the path. So, in all my loneliness and all my despair and all my, one day realizing I can't go back. I can't go back to the girl that used to be, I can't, there's no way. I can't just say, hey, never mind, just kidding. I don't want to go through this process. It had already begun, Betrayal had already happened. Heartbreak had already happened. Brokenness, upheaval, it had already happened. So I just remember getting tired of not having no choice, not even being tired of it, just not having a choice on the matter of feeling grief for myself and having a pity party. One day you just have to stand up and you just have to keep going in life. And that's where I was at. So I put my big girl britches on, and I didn't make all my choices right. I'm not going to say that. But what I did do is decide I'm not staying here. I'm not staying here So I had to get up. I had to finish high school. I had to graduate. Along the way, I was dealing with this boy, and I got pregnant with my first daughter, and that lit even more of a fire for me to progress and go somewhere and move somewhere forward, you know? So I got a job, you know, and I got my first apartment with the boy, you know? And then things happened there, and guess what? I still had to move forward. Back then, it was just like an insatiable hunger to survive. The transformation that happened inside of me was a transformation from being a kid and having things provided, and like, you know, the answers was always coming from, and the guidance and the next steps were always coming from whatever adult was in my life, or whatever, you know, higher authority was in my life, to now I'm the authority. Looking back at that time period, I realized that I was going through a major transformation. One of the first major transformations, I'll say, in my adult life that I would have to go through. And that's the perspective that I was writing from when I wrote my first chapter in the Rising Scorpio, called Born into Transformation. The legacy principle in that chapter is a simple one. It's transformation starts when you stop asking, how to get my old life back? And you start asking, who is my new life asking me to become?